I recently graduated high school at the time, and he said, you're like the Warren Buffett of esports. Why don't you just start building your own like startups? And I said, let's do this.
Hey everyone, this is Prashant and I'll be your host for the VC10X podcast. And today we have Tristin Chambers with us. Tristin is a creator, an esports organization owner, a VC, plus a 15 times founder. In this episode, we talk about Tristin's story and how he started investing, how he operates a startup incubator, VC fund, and a venture studio at the same time, how to think about investing in esports, how's the creator economy shaping up, how he adds value to portfolio companies, and his prediction for the future, and a lot more. So without wasting any time, let's dive straight in. Hey Tristin, so good to have you on the VC10X podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for inviting me. Really appreciate you letting me be on the podcast.
Yeah, pleasure hosting you. So to start things off, can we first have your story and how you started investing?
Absolutely. So for me, I'm originally from Los Angeles. I grew up in a military family in the United States, so I got to live all over the world and really experience different things. And on a more professional side, my professional journey it goes back about 10 years or so, where I've been a content creator or an influencer, as people know these days. Got into esports, from a very early, perspective in its history, building my first team and working with other teams. And then from there, just gradually have kind of been able to bounce into different areas of media, sports, entertainment, all sorts of different things. For me, how I got into investing is actually sort of a natural progression of I've always had a love for finance, for the stock market, things of that nature, and always really been asking myself over the last few years, like, it'd be really great to invest in the companies, but also I knew from family who worked in the financial space, you sort of had to be an accredited investor, and then eventually, um, with like the Jobs Act and things of that nature, made it a little bit more easier. Um, and as of about 6 months ago, is really when I started making the push to be an investor in startups.
That's great. And you're doing a lot of things. And so you were first a creator and then you became an investor. And then after, did you start investing from the public markets or was it directly into the startups?
At first, it was starting in the public markets, more of a lot of companies that you would expect, like your Amazons, Googles, things of that nature. There was a time where I dabbled in a lot of the SPAC companies that were popping up here and there, which was a fun period of time for sure. Um, and then, certainly, I was always advising startups in different ways, both as an influencer and from a business standpoint. But eventually, I got to a point where I stumbled upon Republic and WeFunder, and that sort of opened up the more actual equity investing into startups.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And Spark, I went on the website and it's actually multiple things. It's not just a VC firm, it's actually also an accelerator, it's also a startup studio. So it's multiple things. Can you tell me more about how it's organized and how different parts operate?
Yeah, absolutely. So Spark, I started it about 6 years ago, originally as a holdings company or a parent firm, really, for the esports team that I run, because um, around 2016 we were in a very pivotal time in the esports industry where broadcast rights, sponsorships, a lot of corporate aspects from traditional sports were coming into esports, and I saw the idea to differentiate ourselves from smaller teams by creating, a corporate parent. And so from there, eventually over time, um, we dabbled in being a strategic agency, helping people out in the space. And I found that I was starting to really enjoy building startups, really had a lot of ideas. I've always been a very creative person. And so I blame it on like a friend of mine one day. I recently graduated high school at the time, and he said, you're like the Warren Buffett of esports. Why don't you just start building your own like startups? And I said, let's do this. And so started building all sorts of different companies over time. I think the number is around 15 that I built like in a rapid, time frame. And then from there, I really started to get into startup accelerating. I knew a lot of the startup accelerators here in the Midwest where I live, and talk to them, pitch to them at times. So I really got to learn how they think, and have done some of that. And then more on the hedge fund side of things is sort of, going full circle with how I started investing, just in general, being able to invest not only in, the companies that are trying to get to that IPO stage, but also now the companies that went through that, and sort of being long-term believers in companies in different sectors and industries.
Yep, I absolutely love that tag that your friend gave you, the Warren Buffett of esports, right? And since we have you on here, so let's talk about the esports ecosystem. And for the audience that is maybe not that familiar with this category, can you give us in layman term what is esports as a category, and then how do you look at investing in this category, and what are the themes that are coming up?
Absolutely. So for those that really don't know a lot about esports, the best way to kind of describe it is that it's competitive video gaming. It's $1 billion industry. I think actually it's higher than that now. I think we reached like $1 billion as an industry, in like 2019 or 2020, something like that. And basically it is, people, whether it's teenagers, young adults, or adults of all, ages and backgrounds, competing either in solo tournaments or together on rosters for some of the most popular AAA titles, and even your more independent, or very niche titles, right? So the ones that more come to mind are like Call of Duty, League of Legends, Rainbow Six, Valorant, Fortnite, tons of other ones for sure. And it's really been intriguing to see the space over the last 10 years grow. From this thing where sort of the stereotype of kids in their parents' basement playing video games to now like $60 million broadcast deals for leagues that are $20 million buy-ins. And I think some NFL teams have their own esports teams, and colleges offering scholarships to people. So there's all those types of things. The certain exciting themes that are happening right now in the esports space is that there's a lot of talk of how to really, um, I would say, sort of reinvent, the esports organization landscape, because traditionally, esports is not a profitable endeavor for, brands out there. Like FaZe is extremely not profitable right now. Actually set to be delisted from the stock market here within like the next month or two, I think. You look at, and if they're just, if they're the biggest, most profitable or most valuable esports organization in the world, you can imagine the hundreds, if not thousands, of others out there. I see as well just a lot of development when it comes to, different regions and different games, and a push for more diversity, a push for more independent, activities, and things of that nature. So there's always something interesting happening.
Right, absolutely. And if looking at it from a VC perspective, because we have a lot of investors who follow our podcast, so they would want to understand what are the kind of opportunities coming up in esports, what are the kind of startups like within esports that they can probably invest in. So can you throw some light on what are the themes they can look at? What are the kind of startups that can actually succeed and have a market in the esports space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a sort of difference between being successful and profitable, right? There's, I sort of equate it to, and I know it's a little bit of a different, um, market, but let's take broadcast television as sort of an example. There's a network that here in America is known as the CW, was widely successful with creating a lot of shows that people loved, really got a lot of attention and built a fan base, but it was never profitable. A lot of esports teams are very successful, build up these massive fan bases, but either break even or aren't very profitable, when it comes down to it. ultimately, I think the areas that people can invest into, if you're an angel investor, traditionally is going to be in esports teams, your SaaS companies, your companies that are catering, in the B2B space, or there are some, D2C brands that are really trying to get in. But I think it's more on the data side, more on the commercialized side, more on the news and analytics and those types of endeavors. I'm sure that there's some others that will pop up. I think the commercial experiences and merchandise area of esports has been thriving for some time. So there's always something that people can invest into.
Right, absolutely. And you being a creator yourself, how do you look at the creator economy and any startups that you've backed in the space, and where do you see the most biggest opportunities popping up? Because I believe you've been a creator for about around 10 years now at this point, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember the very early days of the internet before I even started making the YouTube channel. I talk about it all the time. I have friends of mine that work at YouTube who I know more about the original days of YouTube than they do. And and as far as like the creator economy right now going, I think it's at a very interesting time, right? Like TikTok and the pandemic really helped, I think, bring in a whole new wave of creators, right? Because you look at short form content. Really, the only players we had in the space beforehand were Vine, which died. We had Snapchat, which has kind of been eroded by the bigger platforms, and then there was Instagram, which kind of filled that void, but also really lost like a lot of the social discoverability. Whereas like TikTok has been doing an exceptional job with that, and launching many careers, right? Charlie D'Amelio, Kabi Lame, tons of other, people in all sorts of different worlds. And even if you're just some random person who's making transition, trending videos, like they're always blowing up. So I think there's that. And then you start to also see, especially like in the gaming space, a lot of people like Mr. Beast who certainly had been in the space for quite some time and had a really, a meteoric rise, but over the last 2-3 years, really went from being someone who had a couple million subscribers to now being the largest individual YouTube channel, helping launch other people's careers, creators being able to take their audience and the money they make from content and then start businesses and start venture funds and doing all sorts of different things. So there's that. And then I think as well, there's just so many companies out there now that are catering to the creator space, whether it's on the merch side, the analytics side, the B2C, link in bios, all sorts of different companies. So there's a lot of explosive growth, and I don't think it's going to stop.
Right, absolutely. I'm super bullish on the creator economy, me myself being one of the creators, right? And like you mentioned in this conversation that you are a 15-time founder yourself, right? So can you give us an insight into what were the kind of companies that you founded, and how does that play into what you're doing today as a creator and as an investor? How does that add value to your maybe portfolio companies?
Absolutely. That's a very good question. For me, some of the businesses, I mean, I started out with obviously the esports team. Not really thinking it was going to become a business. I think like a month from now, we celebrate 10 years as a esports and content brand, which is exceptional to think about. And for context, I'm only 23, so I've spent a large amount of my young adult and my adult years so far in this space,
Right.
and some of the businesses I've created are media and production companies. I've done tournament operators. I've done I took a swing at trying to build my own social media company, and then I acquired someone else's for the fun of it. I helped with building talent agencies for influencers at a small to medium size following. I've done fan engagement platforms. I had a small time during the pandemic where I tried running a sort of indie app development company for the fun of it. So there was always something that I tried doing just to kind of see where I could go. and do things. And there's always some ideas that I have. One of my big ones I'm working on right now is a company called Replay, targeting the 16 to 35 demographic globally with entertainment through books, TV shows, streaming, things of that nature, to really rival a lot of these platforms that you see mass canceling shows and losing audiences. And so, there's one of those. I mean, I think there's always something that I'm going to be doing, and juggling like 4 or 5 different projects at the same time. Um, it's really something I like. And I apologize, I don't remember the other parts of the question you asked.
No, that's cool, and that's incredible that you're always like doing different things, and that is pretty evident when you come across that kind of a person. You look at their Twitter bio, and there's 5 to 10 different things mentioned there, and you clearly know that this
Yeah.
person actually juggles a lot of things and enjoys doing different things. And I absolutely love that. And yeah, the other part of my question was about value add. So how do you add value to your portfolio companies?
Yeah. So when it comes to value add, there's a lot of different things I can do for the companies that I work with compared to a traditional angel investor, right? If you think about the fact that someone who invests in a company, their big thing is being able to share it with a network and get other people investing into the company. Whereas from an influencer standpoint, I'm someone who posts about the company. I share about the companies. I, really spend a lot of time on phone calls with founders, trying to understand, where are they at in their particular stage at time? How can I help them bounce? It's a lot of times bouncing ideas with them to, say, hey, growth is going great for you guys, but you're missing this market. Or have you considered adding this to the lineup of products or services that you guys are doing? Have you considered X, Y, and Z that'll make the process a lot better? It's always sort of different things. There's a lot of times companies that I have in my portfolio of investments that I don't reach out to, and it's because they know more about that space than I do. And so I try to say, hey, look, if you need my help with something, by all means. But I'm also aware, like, there are some startups that I've invested into where I'm like, again, you know more than I do, and the only thing I can really do is like sit back and wait to test out the product. So, um, additionally, one thing I do to add a lot of um, eyeballs and notoriety to the startups I have is through my podcast and through content that I do. I relatively try to shout out the companies I work with all the time.
Right. Absolutely. That's great. And coming over to my next question, which is about what do you think is going to is the future going to hold for us? And since you're at the forefront of these futuristic technologies, whether it's esports or the creator economy, everything is like starting out right now, and it's going to go a long way. So, what do you think does the future look like maybe in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's a very good question. I personally don't know. And like the funny thing is, like, if you asked me 5 years ago about like esports in the creator space, I could have come up with like 100 different ideas. Um, and I think it's just because so many interesting things have happened throughout the last 10 years that I've been chasing the creator economy, chasing esports. That I got to a point where it's like I can't predict where things are going to go. Things are going to happen, and I'm just excited to see it. When Astralis, which was a Danish organization, got put onto the stock market there in Denmark, I was appreciative of that. When teams like the Cowboys started buying esports teams like Complexity, I was proud of that. When again, people like Mr. Beast led to Night Media and building a world class talent agency, and then investing in startups and having a real proof for creators being LPs and all sorts of different things happening in the creator economy. I think it's fair to say like this could happen, but I don't think a lot of people would have expected it as fast as it happened.
Absolutely, absolutely. I totally agree. And now, moving on to a rapid fire round, which wherein I'll ask you 5 quick questions about your investing, and you have to give 5 quick answers. Sounds good.
Absolutely.
All right. So the first one is, what are the sectors and regions you invest in?
That's a good question. So I invest into companies within the esports space, within the media space, the consumer space, and the fintech space, and I'm sure there's going to be some other areas that I invest into. I'm really big on just companies that focus on consumers and community. Given as someone who's an influencer, I believe if you're focusing on people first and community first, things are going to thrive.
Absolutely. And what's the typical stage of investment that you target?
So the typical stage I target is anywhere from pre-seed to Series A companies. There's been a lot of interesting companies I've invested into. That starting out at like a pre-seed stage, raised millions of dollars. There are some interesting companies like Assure Printed Homes I recently invested into, where they're building 3D printed homes and ADUs. And they're a company actually from my hometown in California. So that's something great. There's been companies that I've invested into. Um, one of the more outrageous ones I did was investing into Northern Pacific Airways, which is launching hopefully here in the next year or two. That's doing transatlantic from like Asia and other countries to the U.S. So there's things like that. There's companies I'm investing into in the real estate space that are amazing. Media companies like Zencaster, I recently did investments in. So there's tons of different companies that I'm investing into. There's some in the media space and the EV space that I'm investing into, and some of those have $500 million or almost $1 billion valuation. So I wish I could share the name of those, but I haven't publicly announced them yet either. So
Yeah, that's great. Great to hear like a wide range of startups that you've bagged in like multiple sectors. And what's the typical check size that you put in?
so this is going to be sort of an odd answer from a lot of other angel investors or VCs. I don't have a typical check size. And when I talk to founders all the time about this, it's because as someone who comes from a creator standpoint, realizing no two creators or brands are the same, I look at it and go, not all the same startups are the same, right? Just because Y Combinator gets $100 million fund and then splits it evenly between every company, you're not valuing is one company better than the other in some aspect, or is one having a higher rate of growth, or are they having more industry traction. So I tell a lot of founders that, hey, I'm not going to invest the same as I did to another company in another sector or even the same area as you, because you might be doing something different that I like that company isn't. And, I think it creates a little bit of freshness, and I think it also creates a little bit of competition for some companies to really work hard towards, more investing.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely a very, very good answer. And where can founders pitch you in case there is a direct way?
Well, I mean, there's a couple different ways that people can reach out. Typically, I'd say through my personal Twitter is where a lot of founders can reach out to me, even if it's something where it's like, hey, you're not ready to pitch, but you want to get advice on a pitch deck or on the company, or something that you think about. Like, I'm super open to always talking with people, getting on phone calls or Zoom calls with people, and really trying to help better people. But when it comes to pitching, I would say definitely that, and I think as well, um, my VC's website, that being Spark, will have a forum set up sometime soon in the next week or two for people to officially pitch out to us.
Right. Great. And my last question is about where can our listeners follow you?
Well, there's a myriad of different places you can follow me. Again, being an influencer, I'm on I think almost every social media platform. I think besides MySpace. That's the one platform I never got onto was MySpace. Um, but the biggest way I would say people can follow me is I have a link in bio through the company known as Pillar.io, and the link to that is Taze.tv, and you're able to see all my social medias, my YouTube content, my podcast. Sign up for my newsletter. all sorts of different things that I do. So that's the easiest, most simplest way to find me.
Absolutely, that's great, because I was thinking it's going to be a lot of work putting down the show notes for this episode, but then there's this so now there's that one link that I can put, and everyone can go there and find all your other links there. So great, I'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on, Tristin. I love the work that you're doing, and I'm very excited about the future that you're going to invest in and build in esports and in the creator space. Thank you for coming on, and
Absolutely.
happy investing.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me on the podcast.
My pleasure.